And we're going to read from Ecclesiastes 5:10 to 15, and then Philippians 4:11, 13. So the first text for this morning is Ecclesiastes 5, starting with verse 10. He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This is also vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. So what profit have the owners except to see them with their eyes? The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not permit him to sleep. There is a severe evil which I have seen under the sun. Riches kept for their owner to his hurt, but those riches perish fortune. When he begets a son, there is nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, naked he shall return, to go as he came. And he shall take nothing from his labor which he may carry away in his hand. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased and I know how to be abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to be abound and to suffer in need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Amen. You may be seated. When I think about the futility of comparing ourselves to other people, I think about a real story that happened in the summer of 1984 in LA. Two friends participated to a show. It was called Let's Make a Deal. And at the end of the show, the host would offer 3 prizes. He would choose 3 people from audience, and he would offer 3 prizes. Now, surprisingly, both of these two friends were chosen to get the prizes. And one of them won the first prize, which was $350. The second one won the second prize, which was $1,200. And the third prize was won by an older lady, and it was a brand new, very expensive piano. And the first guy that won $350 said, well, that's nice. I won a prize. I'm happy, but I really wish I would have got the big money. His friend that won the $1,200 said, well, that's nice. That's a nice chunk of money, but I really wish I would have gone for that piano. Well, the lady that won the piano said, well, the color of the piano really doesn't match the color in my living room. I really wish I would have got the money. Well, none of these 3 people were happy with what they win because they didn't win what they wanted to win. Now, the rest of the people in the audience weren't happy because they didn't win anything. And this kind of reminds me of Benjamin Franklin's quote, and who is that is really rich? Him who is content. And that is no one. And this morning, I want to come before you with a message that talks about the danger of comparison. The danger of comparison, the danger of comparing ourselves to other people. And the title of my message is The Trap of Comparison. The Trap of Comparison. And the first thing that we have to know about comparison is that it affects God's desires for our lives. Comparison affects God's desires for our life. You know, we choose to compare ourselves to other people, although we know that this will deprive us from experiencing joy in our life, and yet we choose to do that all the time. As a definition, comparison is a state of dissatisfaction with God's provisions for my life, which leads to an obsession for having more. Comparison is a state of an attitude of dissatisfaction with God's provision for my life, which leads to an obsession for having more. And the word for comparison in the Old Testament was covetousness. When you read the 10 Commandments, you can see that the climatic command of the 10 Commandments is not thou shalt not murder or commit murder, or thou shalt not commit adultery, or thou shalt not lie, but thou shalt not covet. Because all the other commandments flow from these commandments. Actually, all the other sins are actually flowing from this sin of covetousness. Covetousness. Covetousness is the basis for the first sin in the Bible. Remember, in Isaiah 14, Lucifer, he was number 2 in heaven. But he wasn't happy with number 2. He wanted to be number 1. He wanted to be like God. He wanted to have God's power, God's strength, God's majesty, and he ended up where he ended up. Covetousness was the basis for the second sin in the Bible when, remember, Satan in the form of a serpent goes to Eve and points to that tree. And instead of pointing to Eve all God's provisions for her life, he pointed to Eve that one prohibition. And this is what, brothers and sisters, the devil does with us today. Instead of pointing to us all of God's provisions for our life, he's pointing to us that one prohibition. He comes to us and he says, well, he looks at the things that we can't do. You can't smoke, you can't drink, you can't commit adultery, you can't lie, you can't do this, you can't do that. Instead of pointing to us all of God's provisions and all of God's blessings that he's got for us. Covetousness was also the basis for the third sin in the Bible. When Cain, in hate and rage, he killed his own brother Abel because he desired his status, he desired his sacrifice, he desired his treatment. Comparison or covetousness is a dissatisfaction with God's provisions for my life, which will ultimately lead into an obsession for having more. It's a desire that makes people commit a sin. You see, it was Lot's desire for a better land that made him end up in Sodom and Gomorrah and then with his family destroyed. You see, it was Jacob's desire for a better inheritance that made him cheat his brother Esau. It was Joseph's brother's desire for more attention from their father that led him into selling their brother into slavery. It was Moses' desire to put a quick end to slavery that made him killing that Egyptian. It was David's desire for a more thrilling sexual life that led him into committing that sin with Bathsheba. And it was Solomon's desire for more power that led him into fading away from God. And we can see this play day after day after day in our lives. For instance, a man making $150,000, he can go to a casino, and in a desire to make more, he's going to lose it all. A Christian wife with family, with kids, and with her husband, in a desire to have more people loving her, she will cheat on her husband and lose her family, her kids, her husband, and ultimately her lover as well. A couple with two well-paid jobs, in a desire to have a better job, they will quit their jobs and they will start a business, and ultimately they will lose it all. And what's interesting and what's tragic in the same time, it's the fact that more is not actually more, but more becomes less. You see, the man that makes $150,000 a year in a desire for making more, he's eventually going to lose it all. The woman that desires more love, she will end up with nobody loving her. And then the couple that desire a better job will end up with no job, because more is not necessarily more. Many times, more becomes less. More becomes less. Comparison is something that affects God's desire for our lives. Then the second thing is the fact that comparison offers a false image of happiness. Comparison offers a false image of happiness. And there's two myths in the world, at least two. And the first one is, you can have it all. Have you ever heard this? You can have it all. I remember when I was little, parents would tell their kids, and it might happen even today, when you grow, you can be whatever you want. You can be whatever you want. Parents, be very, very careful with that statement. You can be whatever you want, because they're going to get in the first grade or second grade, and we're having these sick professors, right? They're going to come and they're going to say, you're a boy, you can be a girl. You're a girl, you can be a boy. No, you can't be whatever you want. You can only be what God made you to be. You can have it all. No, you can't have it all. There's always going to be someone that is going to be smarter than you, than me. It's always going to be someone that will have more money, will have more prestige. It's always someone that was going to be better looking. It's always someone that is going to have a better job, right? And, quite frankly, you can't have it all, right? I mean, if you don't spend time with your kids and with your husband and wife, you can't expect them to love you, right? If you don't read the Bible, if you don't pray, if you don't fast, if you don't stay close to God, you can't expect to have a relationship with God. You can't have it all. It's just a myth. You can't have it all. The second myth is that I'd be happy if I would only have blank. I would be happy if I would just have more, a better car, or a better job, or a better house, or a different mate, right? But most of the people put on that blank, I would be happy if I would have more money. Because you see, for so many people, money is some sort of a passport that allows them to experience things in their life that they think would really make them happy. It's very interesting, the fact that Jesus says that you cannot serve God and money. You see, Jesus doesn't say you can't serve God in sex, or you can't serve God in your job, or you can't serve God in recreational activity, which is sports, right? Although all these three things, they can actually lead into an idol or committing a sin. But Jesus says you can't serve God and money. There's something special about money, about this allure of money. It's some sort of a passport that we think, or many people think that it was. But this is just a lie. This is just an illusion, because money can't make you happy. Can you put 1 Timothy 6:10? 1 Timothy 6:10. Money is not something that would make us happy. For the love of money, Paul says, is the root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Let's look at 6 reasons here why money will never satisfy our souls from this text, from this first text that I just read. 6 reasons why money will never satisfy our needs. First of all, no one has enough money. Verse 10. He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This is also vanity. Have you ever heard about Parkinson's law? Parkinson's law says that expenses expend to consume the available time, or time expends to consume the available time. Now, if you give yourself 2 hours to do a job, guess how long it's going to take you? 2 hours. If you give yourself 6 hours to do a job, it's going to take you 6 hours, right? 2 weeks is going to take you 2 weeks. No one has enough money. You know, you hear so many people that say, well, I make more money than I ever made before, and I still don't have money, because we consume more, we spend more. No one has enough money, or they think they do. The second thing, money attracts parasites. Money attracts parasites. Verse 11, when good increase, they increase who eat them. So what profit have the owners except to see them with their eyes? You know, I think Solomon was probably looking at his payroll, and he said, wait a second, I'm paying all these butlers, all these concubines, all these guards. Where is my money going? Where's my money going? Don't you see when you start making money, like you have all these kind of friends that you never had before, right? I remember when I started working at Disneyland, I had new friends every month, you know? I mean, I had all kinds of friends, you know? I mean, you got all these kind of friends, all these people when you make money, and believe me, IRS is going to be your best friend. So money attracts parasites. That's just the reality. Then third of all, money can be harmful. Verse 13, money can be harmful. It deprives us from the joy. Look here, verse 13. There is a severe evil which I have seen under the sun, riches kept for their owner to his hurt. Why? Because it deprives us from the joy that we can experience in life. I don't know how many of you guys heard about Haiti Green. Haiti Green was a woman that left to the state at the beginning of 1900s, $100 million. Now, $100 million is a lot of money right now, but $100 million was really a lot of money back then. This woman was so cheap that she wouldn't pay her guests to heat her. She would pay for her guests. In the morning, she would drink her oatmeal, eat her oatmeal cold. She was so cheap that when her son contracted a wound in his leg, she spent so much time to find a free clinic that her son contracted gangrene, and he needed to have his leg removed. Now, this is what I call cheap. Money deprives us from the joy that we can experience in this life. But what's even more tragic is the fact that it deprives us from the joy that we can experience in the afterlife. You see, it was the love of money that made that young farmer thinking that it was all well with his soul, not knowing that he's about to die. It was the love of money that made that young rich Lord turn away from God. It was the love of money that made that rich man ignore Lazarus. It was the love of money that made Judas Iscariot betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. And it was the love of money that made the couple Ananias and Sapphira lie to the Holy Spirit and be struck dead, because money will not only deprive us from the joy that we can experience in this life, but money will deprive us from the joy that we can experience in the afterlife. Money also produces anxiety. Look here what verse 12 says. The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not permit him to sleep. Now, perhaps if Solomon would have been, in our days here, he would have probably looked at his employees and he would have said, wait a second, all these guys that I'm paying, they work from 9 to 5 and then they go home and they have supper and they have a good time with their family, with their kids. They don't have to worry about work, right? But I have to worry. I have to worry about paying people. I have to worry about my financing. There's so many things that I have to worry about. And for many of you guys that maybe have a business, you know what I'm talking about, right? I remember when I first came into the United States and I was working for construction, my former boss, he was sometimes in the shop, in the office until 11 o'clock in the night, wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning because you have to, you are stressing yourself. You're stressing yourself of how are you going to pay your employees? You got to pay taxes. You got to make sure that you're going to have a job for the next day. And then you got to make sure that you're going to have some sort of a profit, right? Money, brothers and sisters, my friends, is something that produces anxiety. It's just a reality. That money can easily be lost. Verse 14. But those riches perish through misfortune. When he begets a son, there is nothing in his hand. Money can be easily lost. I remember when I was 12 or 13, we went in a little trip for a day with some kids from church, and we were waiting at the bus station, and I remember this kid, he was a poor family from our church back in Romania. There were 7 siblings, and he was the older brother, and he had 2 sisters with him, and their parents gave them some money. And standing there in the train station for about half an hour waiting, he started playing shell game. I think that's what it's called. Remember Alba Neagra, right? Back in Romania, they used to do that. And he lost all the money that his parents gave them for that day. Now, it wasn't a big deal because we were helping them out, but just imagine, you work all your life, you try to save money, and to see all them gone because of a bad investment, or because of a lawsuit, or because of a catastrophe that can happen, or because of an illness, right? Not having insurance, perhaps. Money can be easily lost. And lastly here, money cannot satisfy, they're only temporal. Money cannot satisfy, they are only temporal. Look what verse 15 says. As he came from his mother's womb, naked he shall return, to go as he came, and he shall take nothing from his labor which he may carry away in his hand. I told one of my friends one time that money can bring happiness, and he said, well, yeah, it's true, it can bring happiness, but it can't sustain it. And then I remember about a quote, Richard DeVos said one time, money cannot buy peace of mind. It cannot heal ruptured relationships or build meaning into a life that has none. I read a story about a girl a few decades ago, and she said this story about her Uncle Lolly and her Aunt Emma. She said Uncle Lolly was always saving money for the rainy days, and when he got into his 60s, he saved $26,000 back then, and he got cancer, and he talked to his wife, and he said, look, if I'm going to die now because of cancer, I want you to promise me in front of me and in front of my 2 brothers that you will take the money when I will die, and you will put the money with me in the coffin, so if I have to pay my way into heaven, I'm going to be able to do it. Now, everybody knew that Uncle Lolly is a little weird, but this was really, really, really odd. But again, Aunt Emma did exactly what she promised in front of him and in front of his brothers, and she said, yes, I will do that. Well, a few months later, this guy, Lolly, died, and the next day, Aunt Emma took the money, she deposited it in the bank, took a check, put his name on, and she put the check in the coffin. You can't take them with you, right? There's no U-hauls in heaven. Money are just temporal. We can't take them with us, but we can send them ahead of us. There's so many needs, right? There's so many needs. A person that is doing some mission in another part of the globe, people that are really in need. We were just talking a few weeks, right, about the parking lot. There's a need there for the parking lot to make that parking lot nicer, and better. There's a need here. There's a need. There's a need in the church. A lot of people are so many times just concentrated on what they can do in Africa or in Asia, right? But there's a need in the church. There's a need right here. There's a lot of people that might struggle and maybe they're too embarrassed to say it. Biblia spune foarte clar că cine nu are grijă de cei din casa lui e mai rău decât un necredincios. Brothers and sisters, my friends, we can't take them with us, but we can send them ahead of us. Money will never satisfy our needs. Money will never satisfy our needs, and comparison offers a false image of happiness. And thirdly and last, Comparison, brothers and sisters, stops us from being content. Comparison stops us from being content. And I want to just talk about, in the end, a little bit about contentment. As a definition, contentment is a state of emotionally and mentally being satisfied. It's being at peace. You know, what's interesting about the Apostle Paul is that he was never happy with who he was, but he was happy with what he had. He was never happy with who he was, but he was happy with what he had. You know, contentment is not something that we are born with. It's not something that we have in our DNA, right? You can see a little kid, right? I look at my son sometimes, and he's not content. And I'm like, you weren't born with that? No, he wasn't. Contentment is something that we have to work on. Contentment is something that we have to learn. And first of all, what we see here is the fact that in order to be content, we need to compare ourselves to God's standards of success rather than the human standards of success. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state to be content. You know, Apostle Paul studied with Gamaliel, right, who was the biggest theologian of that time. And he wanted to become someone. He wanted to be someone. He wanted to be a celebrity. He wanted to be the Hebrew of Hebrews. But when he met Jesus, things changed. And then in Philippians 3:7, he says, all these things that I regarded as gain, I consider them lost for Christ. You know, I love this definition of success. I heard it the other day. Success is knowing God's will for your life and doing it. Success is knowing God's will for your life and doing it. Not God's will for Billy Graham, not God's will for Charles Spurgeon, not God's will for John Wesley. No. God's will for your life and God's will for my life. You know why? Because when we're going to sit in front of that judgment throne that one day, and we're all going to be there individually, God's not going to ask me about what he planned for Wesley or for Spurgeon or for Martin Luther. No. He's going to say, the standard that I had for you, the call that I had for you. Compare yourself to God's standards of success rather than the human standards of success individually. Then second of all, trust in God's sovereign plan for your life. Trust in God's sovereign plan for your life. Verse 13 says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, right? You know, the Bible says through David in Psalm 139, când eram un plot fără chip, ochii tăi mă vedeau și în cartea ta erau scrise toate zilele vieții mele, înainte să fi fost vreuna din ele. Can you imagine that? You know, sometimes I'm thinking, I was born in 1984, and I'm like, 1960, you know, and I love history, and I'm looking back of things that happened throughout the world, throughout the times, and I'm like, God knew then that I will be born in that day. God knew about you, that you will be born in that specific day. On that day of June, on that day of May, God had a plan for your life. And it just breaks my heart when I see people in this country being actually willing to kill babies in the 9th month and with this all late time abortion. And you wonder and you say, why? Why is this happening? How can someone be willing to do that? And then I thought about Dostoevsky's quote. He said one time, without God, all things are permissible. Without God, all things are permissible. All things are possible. But there is a God. There is a church. There is a word that has to stand as the truth. And the church needs to stand up. Stand up for life. Stand up for truth. Stand up for Jesus. A lot of times you think about it, you know, God's plan for you, your wife, your husband, your kids, your relationships, your job, your business, everything that you have, it was God's plan for your life. He knew it before you were even born. A lot of times we say, well, you know, that's true. God might have had a plan for my life, but I'm the one that goes to work every day from 8 to 6. Well, that's true. You do. But you know very well that you couldn't be born handicapped in a wheelchair. I didn't do anything. You didn't do absolutely anything to deserve to be healthy and to be here today. Absolutely nothing. Well, that's true, but I'm going to school. I'm studying. I'm sacrificing myself. I'm getting all these degrees. Yes. But you can get a stroke tomorrow. You know that, right? I can get a stroke tomorrow. And all that will be zero. Do you see in our lives, Everything that we have, everything that we achieve, it's not because of us, but it's only because of God's grace and God's love and God's mercy for us. And thirdly, here, manage your expectations. Manage your expectations. Verse 12, verse 12, and I know how to be abased, and I know how to be abound everywhere, and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to be abound and to suffer need. Manage your expectations. You know, a man did something. He did a survey, so he took $100, and he went to his neighbors every single day for 30 days, and every door in the mailbox, he would leave $100. And after 30 days, he did the same thing, but he skipped one door. And when he starts skipping, people that didn't get the money, they got outside and they start cussing this guy and says, "Where's my $100?" You know, and I think that's what we do with God so many times, you know. We're just unhappy. Like we deserve something, you know. Where's my blessing? God doesn't owe us anything. God doesn't owe us anything. And as a matter of fact, if he owes us something, brothers and sisters, my friends, he owes us death for our sinful nature and for our sinful life. You know, I think about this quote. It's a very powerful quote. It's a very powerful verse. It's in 1 Timothy 6, 7, and 8, where Paul says that we didn't take anything with us in this world, and we're going to take anything with us. If we have food and clothing, we should be content. Can you imagine that if you have food and clothing? In other words, if you have a roof over your head and you know where your next meal is coming from, you should be content. I think most of us have that. As a matter of fact, most of us have way more than that. Most of us are more rich than 80% of the people in this universe, and there's about 7 billion people. Brothers and sisters, my friends, comparison is a trap. Comparison is a trap. It affects God's desire for our lives. It offers a false image of happiness, and it stops us from being content. And contentment is actually the first point. It's the desire that God has for our lives. And in the end, I want to leave you with a question. What are you going to do? What are you going to do when you see someone that has more than you? What are you going to do when you see someone that is more wealthy than you, that is more powerful than you, someone that is happier than you, that achieved more than you? How do you look at that person? How do you look at that brother and that sister? Are you going to look at him or her with envy, with hate, with rage, with anger, with dissatisfaction? If you're willing to do that, then I'm sorry to tell you, but you're just fading away from God and you're getting closer and closer to the angel of darkness. But my desire for you and for me is to be people that are content, people that are happy, people that are grateful, people that are satisfied with what God has given us, because he's given us more than what we deserve. Amen.